Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture, brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
Welcome to the Table. We discuss issues of God and culture. I'm Darrell, Bock, Executive Director for Cultural Engagement at the Hendrick Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. And our topic today is Messianism and Messianics. These are Jewish people who have believed in Jesus. And my guest is Vladimir Pikman, who is the Rabbi, that's the correct title, at Beit Zar Shalom, which is a Messianic synagogue in Berlin, Germany.
Yep.
So we appreciate you coming in, Vladi, and having this discussion with us about Messianic Jews. We're glad to have you here. And what are you doing in Dallas? I mean, Berlin is, you're not exactly in the neighborhood. So how did you end up in Dallas?
Well, this year is a very special year for us because we decided, or just God led us to have a sabbatical here in Dallas. What was originally an idea to do just a research and for me to finish my doctoral dissertation turned out to be a very busy season here at Dallas Theological Seminary, being like a scholar or missionary in residence with the seminary, visiting professor this last spring semester, and also I got involved in teaching Christians how to reach out to their Jewish friends, as well as starting a couple of different outreaches to the Jewish people.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about those down the road. Let's hear a little bit about your story now. Listening to your accent, I know you're not from Texas, so tell us a little bit about your background and how did you end up? You ended up in Germany, but that isn't where you started.
That's very true. I was born and raised in Kiev, capital of Ukraine. At that time, it was the former Soviet Union. I feel ancient, actually. However, I grew up in a liberal Jewish home. In our family, we maintained Jewish identity, but we didn't believe in God. So but part of my life, I was a Jewish atheist. But experiencing much of anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union, I left the country as soon as the Soviet Union began to collapse. I moved to Israel to be around other Jewish people and to be free of anti-Semitism around me. In Israel, through a very, I would say, supernatural encounter with God at the Wailing Wall, I believe that God is real. And it happened just almost like literally by touching the Wailing Wall in old city of Jerusalem. It was like electricity struck. So God is real. Suddenly I knew that. A couple months later, I had my chance to use the Wailing Wall to ask God, the God of Israel, about his guidance for my life, putting there a note with my question to God. So it was pretty challenging thing for me, because I even promised God in this note that I will never complain about his guidance. It was foolish, probably, and can understand. Then very next day he sent me back to Ukraine. I was complaining like crazy. I came back to Ukraine as I thought just to finish my studies at the university there. At that time, I was finishing my Master of Science in Mathematics. But I met my old Jewish friend who meanwhile became a believer in Jesus. And he started talking to me about believing in Jesus, about the fact that I'm a sinner, that I need Jesus, and otherwise I'm going to burn in hell. I didn't like any of these things. Especially it was strange for me that he as a Jew believes in Jesus, because for me, it was just Jewish people don't believe in Jesus. Why? Because Jewish people don't believe in Jesus, period. No explanations I needed, at least at that time. It was clear. At the same time, I was getting jealous, observing my friend having things that I was missing in my life. He was sort of peaceful, loving, forgiving, confident, and he was claiming that when he's praying to Jesus, his prayers responded by God. So even in my life, as I had some challenges, I was going to my Jewish Christian friend, asking him to pray for me to Jesus, to his Jesus, for his Jesus to help me.
So substitutionary prayer.
Yeah, sort of. Well, I didn't know this terminology at that time, though.
Yeah.
And I took the Bible and tried to consider, go through the Old Testament, trying to find passages telling that Jesus could not be the Messiah, just like a competition with my friend. It took a year for me to fail. In the Old Testament, I saw enough evidences for me to consider Jesus as the Messiah. But as I decided to try to pray in Jesus' name for the first time, I prayed 30 seconds after this prayer again, saying, Father, if Jesus is not the Messiah, please forgive me, I made a mistake. Because I was afraid of doing something wrong. At that time, I consider that in the whole world, there are only 2 Jewish men who believe in Jesus as the Messiah, my crazy friend and I. And it took 3 more months for God to put me in a situation where I needed him badly. For the first time in my life, felt not like a Jewish angel, but a Jewish sinner. Knew the way to get rid of this sin, needed it very badly, prayed. My life got changed. And got changed so powerfully that I couldn't keep it just for myself. Immediately, the same day, I was already sharing this good news with everybody at work, on the streets. I joined a Messianic congregation in Kiev, then joined the ministry called Chosen People Ministries. At that time, clearly US-based international mission organization. Became minister first in Ukraine, planting congregations there. 1995, to my surprise, God called my wife and me to go to Germany to start a pioneering outreach among Jewish people there. So that's the
So you've
short
been in
version.
Germany how long?
We moved there in 1995.
So 20 years.
20 years total, but minus 4 years in between, like 2002 through 2006, we spent here at Dallas Theological Seminary. Both of us, my wife and I, graduated from DTS 2006. We moved back to Germany. So I would say it's 20 minus 4.5 years.
Okay, all right. Now, let me. There's one part of your background I want to kind of ask about because it's something that's important for people to get about Jewish people. You said you grew up in a liberal home. You were an atheist, so you were Jewish in ethnicity and identity, but not really religious. Would that be a fair summary, or how do you put that together? Most people think they aren't aware of the differences in Judaism, say between Orthodox, conservative, Reformed, and then, secular, just to simplify this.
You mean at that time?
Yeah, at that time.
At that time, well, I was clearly Jewish ethnically, and my identity was Jewish. And it was probably what we consider to be Jewish. Religion was not an issue in the former Soviet Union, but the ethnicity. Actually, biblically and historically, I would say it's a very important component. So the ethnicity or belonging to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I would say biologically, so like descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that's what determines of Jewishness. I mean, religion is attached, worldview is attached usually to a particular ethnos, but even if we remember, if we remind ourselves of the Holocaust, being Jewish for Nazis meant not what you believe in and whether you believe in anything, but more of your origin, your descendants from particular
So
people.
when you say your identity is Jewish and you had an ethnic identity and you had this attachment to Abraham, nothing else came with it other than that attachment. So you weren't thinking about living in a keeping kosher or anything like that, or did you do some of that in your home?
No, not really. It was not an issue. And to be honest, it's not an issue for probably more than half of the Jewish population in the world this day. I mean, like keeping kosher and observing the law. It's not the main marker of a Jewish identity, even today, worldwide, even including probably Israel to some extent. But for us, being Jewish and Jewish identity meant primarily sort of like our destiny. So it's like we were destined to be Jewish. We were considered Jewish by the people around us, and we were considering us as the Jewish people.
You saw yourselves as Jewish.
Absolutely. We saw ourselves this way, and the people around us saw us this way, whether we were willing.
There was no escape.
Or not. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also it was like, being Jewish, it means to belong to certain people, and it's something what you cannot get out of, so to speak.
Okay. I think that's important because some people think about being Jewish as being committed to Judaism and to the practices of Judaism, and those two things don't necessarily go together. As you say, there are many people who are ethnically Jewish but religiously secular. And in that way, it's like the joke you often hear in Israel about the difference between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Jerusalem's the place where all the religious activity takes place, and Tel Aviv is a very secular kind of city, the same kind of distinction.
Exactly.
And so there's a range of, this is part of what makes sharing with Jewish people and drawing them into Messianism interesting, because just because you meet someone and they say they're a Jew doesn't mean that they're all in the same place.
Two Jews, three opinions.
Yes, exactly right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Messianism. And you are, and I've used this title appropriately, you are a rabbi in a synagogue. It meets on the Sabbath, which would be a Saturday. Let's talk about how Messianics view the synagogue, what it's there for, and also what happens in a Sabbath service.
You mean now Messianic congregation?
Yes, exactly, Messianic congregation.
Well, there are different types of Messianic congregations.
Yes.
If there are 3 opinions for 3 Jews, there are 5 opinions for 2 Messianics. The fact is, every Messianic congregation is different. So right now, I can speak just on behalf of the congregation we have in Berlin.
Okay, that's fine.
Our congregation in Berlin looks first part of the service at our synagogue on Shabbat looks very like in a normal conservative or Orthodox synagogue. So we have 1 hour liturgical service with the Torah service, carrying the Torah, reading from the Torah. And then the second part of the service is more contemporary. So not liturgical songs, but more like worship songs, more contemporary type of worship. And then the third part of the service is teaching and prayer. Again, for some Jewish people, liturgical part is important, so they come to the liturgical part. Some Jewish people, they don't care too much about it. They come later. And some people, they don't care, let me rephrase. They care primarily about the teaching, so they come even later.
So people come in and out of the service. It's not, you aren't there the whole time necessarily.
Yes, but in most synagogues, at least in Europe, it has always been the case. So you can come, you can go. It's not like the doors are locked.
And you read through the Pentateuch in the Torah section, and are you on an annual or a 3-year cycle? How often do you get through the Pentateuch when you're reading in it?
We go on an annual cycle.
Okay.
That is most appropriate.
Okay, and then is there in many synagogues there's what's called the Torah reading, and then there's the reading that goes with it. Do you have that as well, or do you just read in the Torah alone?
Well, our service altogether takes about 3 hours.
Yes, I've been there. It is
exactly
a full service.
Exactly. So it's okay for 3 hours. People can take it. But if we will read all, it will probably 4-5 hours. that's why we study that during the week. And we read just some parts of it, a portion during the Shabbat service.
But is there just a Torah reading, or is there another reading that comes with it as well?
Well, usually it's the Torah reading as the core, because in Jewish mind, the Torah represents the entire scripture. So we read something from the core, from the Torah, and during the teaching time and worship time and liturgy time, there are passages from other parts of the scripture, including the New Testament.
Okay, so then that's part of what makes this a Messianic synagogue, is the fact that the New Testament is also a part of the worship service and a part of the teaching and a part of the biblical reflection that goes on in the community. So obviously teaching and prayer are an important part of what happens in the synagogue on Shabbat. What other reasons are there for a Messianic synagogue in your thinking?
Well, there is a whole list of different reasons for Messianic congregations to be important. Usually, we think of missiological reason as the first. Missiological reason, I mean, like for the Jewish people to come and to experience the service that is while being Yeshua, Jesus-centered, at the same time is like home for the Jewish people, culturally, traditionally, liturgically, and etc.
So in that sense, it's not very different from, say, going to a Korean church or an African-American church. If I can use a picture, there's a flavor to the way the worship is done and a set of expectations, and people are comfortable because they were raised in that context to experience that kind of worship.
Right. But that's one reason. This reason I would not consider as the major one, because there are many Jewish people I know who are at home in different churches of different denominations and confessions. So if Jewish people consider Jesus, or believe in Jesus, they can naturally go to a church. And I know many such Jewish people. So Messianic congregation is not unique and not only or exclusive, but a missiological way to reach out to the Jewish people. It's one reason.
And do you know a lot of people who will attend a Messianic congregation on Shabbat, but then also associate with the church on a Sunday, or is that unusual?
Well, there are cases like this, but that's not what I would consider as a good way of doing things, because it's good for somebody to be a member like one body, just and be involved and minister in some place. But let me talk about some other reason for Messianic congregation that I consider more important for some reasons. I see much of ecclesiological reason in the Messianic congregation, because it's a visible expression of Jewish segment of the body of the Messiah, or body of Christ. The unity between Jews and Gentiles, that is the core unity of the church or the body of Christ, according to the Bible, in my understanding, has to be visible. Because in its visibility, this unity demonstrates the way the Messiah is and the way God actually functions together with his Messiah.
So you're thinking of passages like Ephesians 2 and 3 that talk about the Jew and the Gentile together in one body.
Yes, exactly. And I think of passages like John chapter 17, where, as Jesus praying about his disciples being one, for the world to see that Father and Son are one. So it's for me, it's very important when I see that in the Bible, for the Jewish segment, the Jewish component of the body of the Messiah to be visible, and the church in general, I think, should appreciate the Messianic movement, even small, challenging, weak, still not maybe even not united, but it's a very important visible part of the oneness between Jews and Gentiles. And there is another reason that I think very important as well. God has never forsaken or cast away Jewish people as his people, as his chosen people. So God is still faithful to his promises and covenants with the Jewish people. And the Messianic movement, Messianic congregations, they are called, I believe, to be like a demonstration of the covenantal fidelity of the God of Israel and the people of Israel. So this, the last two mentioned reasons are even more important.
So, and that means that people who are members of Messianic community really represent, in the very technical sense of the term, not just the faithfulness of God, but the existence of a remnant that exists in any period of time as God's plan is moving forward.
Right, exactly. Besides, there is another reason that can be debated to some extent in different denominations, but I do believe that it is also a reason, eschatological reason. So emerging of the Messianic movement is also a step in preparation for the Messiah to come back, because the church or the body of the Messiah, what we know is today, according to the book of Acts, started with the Messianic movement, quote unquote, as it was back
Acts
then.
2,
in Acts 2, exactly. And we are coming to a very exciting times actually now, because we see the emergence of the state of Israel, but also, and I would consider that not less important, the emergence of the Messianic movement.
So that kind of summarizes the existence of Messianic communities. Let's talk a little bit about Messianism as you're aware of it in Israel, because one of the things that's happening is that the Messianic movement is growing in Israel. There's been, to some degree, almost unprecedented growth. So if we had your colleague, Michael Zinn, here, he could talk about this directly. That is the ministry that he is responsible for in Israel. But talk a little bit about what you're aware of in terms of the influence of Messianic presence in Israel.
Well, the Messianic community, or the number of Jewish believers in Yeshua, in Jesus, is growing in Israel rapidly in the last couple of years. And many of those who are involved in ministering there, talking even about revival among native Israelis, or those who were born there, so-called Sabras. So it's growing rapidly. It's probably not growing like in Acts chapter 2, 3, and 4, but it is a dramatic growth, because over last few years it was like almost like doubling. The number of believers were doubling almost on an annual basis. So it's very, very significant, and Israelis are getting more and more open to believe in Yeshua. And it's actually the tendency probably worldwide among Jewish people. Jesus is becoming more sympathetic to the Jewish people. So they learn to appreciate him. And you're aware of a number of different Jewish scholars, more like academically secular, through very orthodox, writing books about Jewish Jesus and emphasizing his Jewishness, so telling something with other words like, he's a Jewish guy, he's a good guy, he's one of us. Well, for the Gentiles, but one of us, sort of. So there is a growing openness to think of Jesus, probably because the church is getting more open to the Jewish people, and probably because church is not, the church in general is not so pushy on Jewish people. So
when we think about this, the original influx of influence of a response to Messianism in Israel was also associated to some degree with the immigration patterns into the nation. I think I've heard this right, that many Russian Jews who came to Israel have ended up coming into the Messianic movement. But what I think I'm also hearing you say is that more recently, although the immigration element is a part of this, it's not the only part of what's going on now. Is that right?
Israel.
Yeah, in Israel.
Oh, yes. You're absolutely correct. The Messianic movement, the number of Jewish believers in Jesus, was significantly growing in Israel in 1990s due to the Russian Jewish immigration and due to the revival among Russian Jews worldwide, including Israel. But in this season, we see more and more Israeli-born Jewish people.
Now, you used a technical term, sabra. Most people won't know what that is.
Exactly. That's why I'm trying to use explanation rather than the term.
Yeah. So sabra is a native-born Israelite, basically.
Yeah.
And so even they are becoming open and in dealing with. In fact, one of the interesting things about Israel is the mix that you get. We started off talking about the mix of Jews that you experience from Orthodox to conservative to Reformed to secular, and anyone who's been to Israel will know that you get that whole range in the nation itself. Is there any sense of where, out of those backgrounds, the Messianic movement is having its draw? Is it more attractive to some on that spectrum versus others? I mean, are we talking about, more secular Jews becoming interested in Jesus? Are we talking about more Orthodox Jews becoming interested in Jesus? Where is it coming from? Do you know?
Well, primarily, the interest is the biggest among Reformed Jewish or secular Jewish people. Particularly because they are not part of a very close-knit community. Like with Orthodox, the issue with the Orthodox Jewish people, the issue is not that they just with their knowledge, with their understanding, consciously reject Jesus. They even don't consider Jesus because they are part of a very close-knit community. They even cannot do that. They cannot consider that because in their very close environment, it's no go.
It's not permitted.
No, not permitted at all. So it's very complicated for them, culturally and community wise. For liberal, secular, Reform Jewish people, they are more open-minded and they are more individualistic in sense they have more like freedom embedded in them to think for themselves personally. Besides, take the United States as an example. You have here probably 14% of Orthodox Jews among the Jewish population in the United States. So the Orthodox Jews are not the majority in the Jewish world today anyway.
I haven't even thought about what the percentage of Jewish population is here in the United States, but it's probably not, 1, 2, 3%? Do you know? 300 million people?
3 million. No, it's. I think it's like around 6 million.
Okay, so 2%, basically.
Yeah, 1.9 to be precise.
Okay, all right. Okay, that mathematics background's coming out. I've got two sets of questions that I want to go on. I'm not sure. Let me go back and deal with one thing about the synagogue that I don't think we covered that I think is important, and that's suggested by the reasons for a Messianic synagogue that you raised, but that I think is an important part to appreciate about Jewish culture at large, as seen in the synagogue, and that is the importance of community. Particularly because, and the reason it segues from the number of 2% is because as a minority community, the issue of community is actually pretty important to Jewish people. And the thing that I've told people about my experience in relationship to Messianic congregations is that the Jewish appreciation for community and how it ought to function is a very important value. Even among ethnic Jews, you don't have to be religious to have this dimension. It's an important part of Jewish life. So one of the functions of a synagogue, and you suggested this by talking about, needing a place where they feel at home to worship, et cetera, is this sense of community that you get out of your participation in the synagogue. It's a central gathering place and reference place for life for a lot of Jewish people.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And it's also important for postmodern, secular Jewish people who don't have any community at all. And still, it's probably embedded feeling in all of us, and particularly in Jewish people, to be people of the community. So community is a very important part of a Messianic congregation. And usually the Messianic congregation that I know worldwide, we are very big on community. After services, we have something to keep people together and let people stay together longer. Like at our synagogue or congregation in Berlin, our doors are open 9:30 in the morning, and we close the doors 8 in the evening. The service 3 hours, the lunches together afterwards. There is afternoon program. There is fellowship afterwards. So many people stay in the community whole day, and not because they have to, but because they enjoy it.
So the Shabbat is not only a day of rest; it's a day of community.
Well, in Jewish mindset, Shabbat is the day of community, and community with God and with each other.
Right.
So it's like holy convocation. It's in gathering together with God in the midst.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. Join us next week for part 2. For more podcasts like this one, visit dts.edu/thetable. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.